We have a big turnout here today with us, and I think that's good because it's a bit cold and wet outside. I also just remind everybody that we're on Facebook Live, and we regularly get 3,000 to 5,000 viewers on there, so that's a growing market for us in terms of getting the message and getting discussions out. So tonight we are really having a good time to say that this is one of the topics that I feel a lot about in terms of homelessness in Goulburn and how we deal with it and what the situation is. So I'd like to firstly pay my respect to the elders past and present upon whose land we meet today. That's the case. I would also like to say that the opinions that are expressed by the MC, the microphone, and everybody else here are not of any individual or not of any party group. We are not a group of political members. We are maybe party members of different parties, but we are not run by one particular party. And that each member of the panel here is expressing their own opinion, and that we have no control over what they say. I'd also like to say that be respectful. People often say things that might rub us up the wrong way. So be respectful. You'll get respect. If you don't give respect, then we won't respect you. Okay? So there's people around here who will disrespect you. So without further ado, I'd just like to go along the panel and just introduce tonight's speakers. So from the Goulburn Greens, we have Ian Fife. Okay, and then we have Barney Van Wyck. He's the Canberra Goulburn Chief Executive Officer for St Vincent de Paul. Then we have Tony Ray from Anglicare Goulburn. She's a specialist in homelessness in the local district. We have Ursula Stevens, who is the Goulburn Labor candidate for the next state election. We also have with us tonight a newcomer to the scene with the Liberal Democrats, Dean McRae. And then, okay, that's about all you'll get tonight. I'm just messing with you. Welcome. We love you, mate, and then we have Melina Skidmore from Angels for the Forgotten, a local charity that does a lot with homelessness. So the way we work is we'll give each person 2 minutes to 3 minutes to start, and then we'll work our way down the table. They just sat where they sat, so there's no particular order. And then we'll throw it open to Q&A from the floor. Okay? All right, so Ian?
Can you hear me all right? Facebook feed? Yeah. Right, face to face. Well, my name's Ian Fife. I'm with the Goulburn Greens. It's really heartwarming to see so many people interested in our topic tonight. But let me ask you one question. Put your hand up if you think homelessness is an emotional issue. You think it's an emotional issue? Anybody who doesn't think it's an emotional issue? Right, how many of you are affected by homelessness? Or have close friends or loved ones whose lives have been torn apart because of homelessness due to circumstances quite often beyond their control? Families who've split up, people having to live in cars or sleep out in the open, young people who don't have a place where they feel they belong, where they feel they're loved and respected. And it's well known that people who've grown up with poverty and homelessness are the most likely, most at risk of a cycle of homelessness throughout their lives. Well, I'll tell you what I think. The concept of home is fundamental to the well-being and self-worth of any individual, family or community. A home is not just a shelter. It's a place where people can build quality of life for themselves and for those around them. Everybody has a right to that. Homelessness is an incredibly emotional issue, I think. It's one that we all need to have at the forefront of our hearts and minds, something we should all be actively thinking about, doing something about. The catch is, it's also an issue that won't get any better through finger pointing or blame games. What we need tonight and tomorrow and the next day is ongoing, robust and respectful debate to come to an understanding of what really works.
It's just importantly we do talk into the mics because it helps with the Facebook live feed, so they can hear you online. Thanks, mate.
I'd like to also thank everybody for the opportunity and pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land, past, present and future. Folks, from my perspective, I'd like to start with a little bit of statistics. It's always good to say, well, this is why we're talking and this is why we're having this conversation. If we look at people that's at risk of homelessness, at the moment we talk about more than 116,000 people in Australia. Let's try and quantify that or visualize that. 116,000 people are at risk of homelessness. More so, if we look at the number of children, and let me just use the ACT and New South Wales, which brings it a little bit closer to home for all of us. There's 13,536 children that are at risk of homelessness, according to the ABS recent statistics. So overall, we're looking at a 14% increase of people at risk of homelessness between 2011 and 2016. And if I start to break down in categories and I start to look at, vulnerable people such as, women over the age of 55, etc., between 2011 and 2016, you'll see that what we're dealing with here is an increase. I can carry on with statistics and I'll stop there for the moment just to set the scene for us. Let's talk about Goulburn. If we talk about Goulburn here locally, according to the ABS statistic, we talk about 110 people that's currently at risk of homelessness here in Goulburn, Hawaii. So if we talk about the people that is marginally housed, so we talk about people staying in impoverished dwellings or tents or caravan parks, etc. We talk about 122 people right here. So these are the statistics that we're dealing with that we have to talk about tonight. What are the concerns? For us from a St. Vincent Paul perspective, and what we're looking at is we're looking at a systemic failure to provide adequate affordable housing. And that's something, as was mentioned before, is something that we all have to look at. Again, this is not a finger-pointing thing. We all have to look at how are we going to bridge that specific situation. We need to look at policy changes, which is a problem. I look at one of the things that I stand for is that housing should be a basic human right. That's it. Because if you have a home, we are going to be able to provide wraparound services. Now, there are many solutions like that in Finland and Canada, etc., where that has been very effectively introduced. Of course, there are problems. There's always problems with any solution that you have. But the thing is that, for instance, in Finland, they've done it over 30 years. Now, we had an opportunity like that 30 years to do the same, but we didn't do that for a multiple of reasons. But it doesn't mean that we, can let that one go. We have to address that. We have to do something about that. If we look at, the changes that we have a look at New Start. New Start at the moment, you have $272.90 a week. So that means that you'll have to pay for accommodation, you have to pay for food, you have to pay for clothing, if you have your pharmacy that you have to pay, I can carry on. Think about your own expenses from a home perspective. What do? Can you survive on $272.90? I can't. And then, it's not possible to do that. If you look at the Salvation Army assessment and just the index that they have, they say that once you've paid accommodation, there's only $17 left for you to survive on. That's not possible. You can't do that. One of the other issues that I'd like to mention here is the cost of emergency services that rose 29%. So if we talk about the social and community services that need to be provided to people, it's so expensive. And look at that against the increasing figure of homelessness and ask yourself, what do we need to do? So I don't want to leave it at that. I'd like to offer a solution as well. The point has been raised here from a bipartisan perspective. We need to have a national bipartisan focus on affordable housing, on homelessness. That's what we need to do. We need to look at that, and we all understand this is a topic that we talk about on a daily basis in our case. We need to have a look at addressing the New Start. It is Andrew Barr, the Chief Minister of the ACT, came out the other day and said, absolutely, we have to do that. In real terms, New Start has not increased in 24 years. So how is it possible? We cannot survive, we've got to do that. We have to invest in our community and social services, and also what we have to do is we have to look at the supply of affordable housing. And I'll stop there for the moment. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to ask Tony Ray from Anglicare Goulburn to speak. Am I saying your last name right?
Ray, yes.
Yep, okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm Tony Ray. I'm the Regional Manager of Anglicare, New South Wales South, New South Wales West and ACT.
I don't think that's turned on.
I don't. No? No. I don't speak.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go. I don't talk loud enough. So sorry, I manage homelessness services across Goulburn, Wollongong, Upper Lachlan and Yass Valley local government areas. And I also manage youth and family services and gambling health counselling services across the region. Sorry, I feel like that Tony's got most of my notes. So I think we have the same stuff. So I'm attending tonight to provide information on the current homelessness services data that we have. Unfortunately, homelessness exists not only in Goulburn, but of course nationally. And as Barney said, with a reported 14% rise across Australia. In New South Wales, that's 37% rise in homelessness since the last census. Since the homelessness reforms 3 years ago, the sector has improved in its accessibility and streamlined approaches that really focus on early intervention to prevent homelessness, rapid rehousing, of course our crisis and transitional housing options, and providing intense responses for clients with complex needs, and being able to work longer with clients to make sure that they retain their accommodation. The main factors of homelessness appear to be housing stress and unaffordability. With the rising cost of living, this puts people in tough situations. I would like to start by saying that homelessness or people in housing distress can happen anyone at any time. One major life event or a series of events can result in homelessness. There is no set path, there is no set formula or reason to it. It could be as easy as a two-parent working family to one parent losing an income and going into financial distress. It could be someone escaping domestic and family violence. It could be a single-parent family on Centrelink benefits that don't cover the cost of living. It can be an older person who needs medical treatment and they have to decide whether or not they pay their rent or pay for their medical treatment. The list is endless. The cost of living with continued increases in general living expenses such as food, electricity costs, fuel prices, healthcare, the cost of raising a child, and climate changes, especially for our drought-stricken farmers. Homelessness also does not equate to people on the street, even though we have a high number. It's also people that are at risk of homelessness, who are in that housing distress. In the last financial year, we have had 600 clients through our doors. That 600 also is the children and young people that are associated with family groupings as well. So it's a big number. Last financial year, at this same time, we had 578. It's a big job, but it's the community, and not only our government, but our community's responsibility to help and help as many people as we can and support.
Thank you, Tony. I'd now like Ursula Stevens, the Goulburn Labor candidate, to have a few words.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Yep.
Just got to hold it.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and
Pay my respects to all past and present.
and thank everyone for a really great topic tonight to speak about what's really going on in Goulburn, and for people to really understand that even if you can't see the homeless people who live around us in our community, and very often we don't see them simply because they are so stressed, they're often embarrassed, they're often dealing with very, very complex problems and challenges, and they are kind of at the margins of our community. They're not actually participating in many of the activities that you and I are able to participate in. So we've heard tonight from both St Vincent de Paul and from Anglicare about some of the statistics, and I just want to also just go to those a little bit more, if you don't mind. So we heard that on the census night in 2016, there were more than 37,000 people in New South Wales who were experiencing homelessness, and that was a 37% increase since the previous census. A 37% increase, my friends, is 10,236 more people. And of those 10,000, we have 112 of them living in our community right now. We have the people who actually were seeking the support of St Vincent de Paul and Anglicare and other specialist homelessness services was 75,000 people. That's an extraordinary number of people living in extraordinary levels of stress. And as we just heard from Tony, most of that is about cost of living pressures. Most of it is about this financial distress that people are living in. And if you are only surviving, well, barely surviving on New Start, as Bernie said, you know that it is an impossibility. The stress for people living day to day, having to make stressful decisions every day about what they're going to pay and what they're going to do and whether or not they're going to eat or whether or not they're going to actually have medication, just becomes the only stresses that they can deal with. How could they possibly be trying to find a job or keep a job if they are homeless or in such a precarious situation that they are liable to be homeless? And that's one of the issues that we often don't see at all in the community. The people who are living in houses trying to support a mortgage, perhaps losing a job, trying to keep the house, that's their investment, they don't want to lose everything, but they actually don't have a stick of furniture or anything in their fridge. That's the reality of the homeless people living among us. The issue that we have about, Barney just made some really sensible recommendations about the things we have to do. Homelessness is a wicked, wicked problem. A wicked problem in that it is incredibly complex. It's not just about the bricks and mortar. It's about the wraparound services that need to go with people who are the most vulnerable in our community, to sustain them and to keep them from a precarious life that may well be prison is safer than the streets, or children being in a domestic violence situation or a family violence situation. We have to find the ways that we can wrap around those services. And some of the work that Anglicare is doing as the lead agency here in Goulburn is all about that. I'll leave it there for now, and we can talk more about them later.